Welcome everyone this afternoon. I was thinking last night, we're all pretty passionate about waste, even so to go rummaging through charity stalls and looking to reuse some outfits for fancy dress dinners at the waste conference, but we're so passionate we even like to work with poo. So that's what our project's about. Our project was about composting biosolids with green waste and using the static pile inoculant composting technique for that process. The SPIC, as it's called, is a biological inoculant that used to catalyse the composting process, and the piles were covered with tarps throughout that process. This project was also to produce a pathogen-free composted material that the council could use internally or for sale for the community. So why council did this project? A bit of history. In the late 90s and up until around 2006, council was actually composting biosolids and green waste. With green waste at that time, Queanbeyan Council, as it was, former before we merged, was also trialling the first city to soil project of curbside green waste recycling. I think we were the first ones in New South Wales to do that. And of course that has continued on. Also at the time we actually won an award for innovation and reducing waste to landfill with our project using biosolids and green waste. Around 2006, biosolids and green waste composting ceased, and I've spent quite a while, actually, while I've been at council, sort of trying to work out why we weren't still doing it, and finally looking through files and so forth, I found there was some little internal issues about who pays for what was one thing, but also there was concerns over the heavy metals that were found in the biosolids. So since it stopped, there has been issues. The biosolids have kept piling up and they're still there, and our green waste also wasn't being used as much as it had been, so again it started to pile up as well. We also have a 1930s water treatment plant, sewage treatment plant. It's due for renewal, and there was a renewed interest in what to do with the biosolids. Staff at our Waste Minimisation Centre had also just finished a Cert 3 in waste management, and they were keen to sort of use their new skills and learnings and get stuck into a project. Our council is also committed to sustainability and resource recovery and sees that biosolids is actually a regional issue, and council wanted to be a part of finding a solution for that. So what were council's concerns? They had so many concerns. It was a lot of talking. Of course, there was concerns over contamination. I mean, any time you mention poo, everyone just goes, too hard. The heavy metals and bacterias. So treating biosolids up to a relevant classification and contamination was an issue. Cost of the processing, of course, I got grilled about how much is this going to cost, how much more staff do we need. So there were concerns about that. Were staff able to do this? Were they experienced enough? Did they know enough about work health and safety working with biosolids? There's also movement across border. Our waste treatment facility is actually in the ACT and has been there since the 1930s, and so there is cross-border issues there. EPA regulations and licences, again we're working with ACT EPA who will licence the facility as well. And also just the composting regulations in general and biosolids regulations. And then finding end users that will be able to use the product at the end is also an issue that was considered. So what we did, we had lots of meetings with engineers. I had so many meetings with them and trying to talk them into going ahead with this. Finally, we put a report to council to give it a go, and they approved that, which was great. Finally, as council approved it, engineers came on board, thank goodness. So there was, so the engineers, and we had other stakeholders involved in the project as well. So it was a 3-month trial we decided to do, and we partnered with Resource Recovery Australia, so Emmeline, and Cecil, who was the environmental consultants who helped us with that as well. So Resource Recovery Australia designed and supervised the trial. Cecil provided oversight and did the testing of the material throughout it, and also put together a report on our process before we started to make sure it ticked the boxes for EPA guidelines and on the products. Council then provided the land, the feedstock and labour. And now Emmeline's going to talk about the process.
We were really pleased for an opportunity to partner with Council on this project because we found this technique, SPIC, which stands for static pile. It just stays in the one windrow, we don't move it. It's inoculated with microbes, the same microbes that do yoghurt and sauerkraut and fermented sausage. So it's a really versatile technique, and we've used it across carcasses, biosolids now, green waste, food waste. It's really a great technique that's low cost and really gets rid of a lot of pathogens. It's proven itself very effective. And covering, as you can see there, the windrows, just the tarps, we found helps keep that moisture in there and makes sure the process goes really well. Another reason we like this is it's really low cost. You don't need aerobic kind of processes to happen. It doesn't go into the stinky anaerobic phase. It uses less water because we cover it, and it keeps the moisture cycling within. And it has very low odour, often because it's covered in the tarp, so if there's odours within, they're not getting without. But even with the tarps off, it's really quite low odour. I did also want to say that this technique is the same technique used by the city's soil program. James Turnell in Armidale Council's had a lot of success with it, and so has Simon in Pallarang there at Lantasia. They've been doing it for really quite a long time now. So it's the same technique, it's really quite versatile, and we were really delighted to be able to use it on the composting technique here with the biosolids. We've got a report that we're going to give you emails about, and it has more of a fact sheet on this SPIC method, so email us and we'll be able to give you even more detail.
So, did we achieve our goals and ease concerns? I think after they said that we could go ahead with it, they all went and hid away, those engineers. They didn't seem to... they were waiting for the report but didn't want to interfere at all. But yes, we reproduced a pathogen-free compost. The process enabled the inputs to be managed to reduce the risk of heavy metals as well. We achieved the AS4454 and the New South Wales biosolids requirements, and we also found that this was not only trying to test out the process, but it was also a really good opportunity for our staff who'd been involved in processing green waste from curbside for a long time the same way. It was a good opportunity for them to actually get out and do something a little bit more challenging and see what the results would be at the end of it. It sort of motivated them so much that we've actually got one of our staff members here because he's now so keen on waste and wants to venture out. He's come to the waste conference. So space was a limitation. It was a limitation for the trial. The area that we were using is it's also the water treatment plant, but it's also where we compost our normal green waste from curbside. So having a space there just for the trial was tricky. But now, hopefully with the merger of the two councils, with Queanbeyan and Pallarang Regional Council now, we'll have more space, hopefully in the future, to expand the processing onto some land that will be, have more room to do this sort of thing. If it does continue with the new treatment plant, that's being built on the same footprint of where it is now, so they are very limited with space, so they would have to take into concern of where they were going to do the processing if they decided to go down this path, to have hard stands and all that sort of thing as well. Having the stakeholders on side was one of the biggest hurdles for this project. As I said, I've been sort of looking at it for a few years, and it just took that the timing right where suddenly they were having to build a new sewage treatment plant. As part of that, they want to reach ISCA standards for sustainability infrastructure, and in doing that, they have to come up with some way of dealing with biosolids. So I think it was just that opportunity we were able to jump onto and then able to do the trial. So what we found out, it's not difficult to do. As Emmeline's described, it's quite low labour intensive, it's not expensive, it's not difficult to set up. Temperature is very important throughout the process of testing it regularly to not only reach the requirements of the EPA, but also to make sure the process is working and it hasn't cooled down too much, or temperature will indicate whether it's got enough moisture, and in that case we'd need to uncover and respray with water or something like that to keep it going. So that was very important. What we did find with this, we had two different inputs. We had our curbside from green waste bins as one part of the trial, and we also had self-haul material from residents as another part of the trial. And we found that the green waste from curbside bins was actually contaminated with dieldrin, which was quite a surprise to us, because dieldrin apparently hasn't been around since the early 90s, but obviously some backyard person had probably sprayed their apple tree at some point and it ended up in the bin and got shredded and went through the whole pile. So unfortunately we didn't find that out till the end, pretty much the end of the process. But the heavy metals were manageable as well, so they came out quite well. And so I suppose that, it was interesting with looking at what you're putting in there. I think we sort of worked out maybe we should have tested some of the material before we actually put it together in the piles, so that if it did have contaminants that we weren't able to deal with, that we could leave that, not use that for that sort of thing. So the staff really enjoyed the project. It got quite a few people from different areas of the council involved in the trial, and other people sort of inquiring about how it was going. They were keen to find out what was happening. It did take longer than 3 months. We started just before Christmas, so we had the holidays in between, and then we had staff off and some weather issues. So it took longer than 3 months, but in a way it didn't really matter, because it can just sit there. It wasn't a problem for anybody, and it just sort of composted for a bit longer. So once we pulled off the tarps and had it tested finally, it was that length of time wasn't an issue. So what's Council doing with the project findings? So the report will be used to inform the design of the new sewage treatment plant. And again, for their new project, they will be going for ISCA awards. So it is important that they try and do as much as possible, as sustainably as possible. And they're looking to have a new sewage treatment that's top design. And then also being able to show them that we can use a method that's actually quite simple. We don't have to go and buy really expensive equipment to process biosolids or just green waste. We can do it very simply with our own staff. We don't need to have millions and millions of dollars in this invested. So it was able to show them that it's doable, and we can get a product at the end that's safe and can be used for the community. At the moment, we've ended up with quite a small pile of stuff by the time it's sort of composted down, and we've just put aside the stuff that's got dieldrin in it, and we'll just let it sit there for a little bit longer. And the other piles that were fine ended up being mixed with our normal green waste and came out with really good results after that was tested again as well. So it worked well. Do you have anything else to say?
No, I think another one of Council's aims was to share the results of the findings, so it's not just a silo process. So if you would like a copy of the report, looks a bit like this. Mine's getting a bit dog-eared now. Do email one of us, or grab my card at the Resource Recovery Australia site just opposite the inside where the transfer buses are, and we're really delighted to share this report through you. It goes through the copper concentrations, the dieldrin concentrations, really quite a lot of information to help you get something like this set up at your place.
Thank you.